When people talk about betrayal, they usually mean heartbreak, lies, or a broken promise. But for me, betrayal came dressed as something far crueler, the voice of my own mother echoing through a courtroom. My name is Isabel, and I grew up believing that my mother, Carol, was my biggest supporter. She used to tell me I was born for greatness, but somewhere along the way, that belief turned into resentment. Maybe it was jealousy. Maybe disappointment. Whatever it was, by the time I was 25, my mother and I were on opposite sides of everything. Family, money, and even my career. When my father passed away, he left behind a small property in both our names. It wasn't much, just a modest cottage by the lake, but it meant everything to me. It was where he and I used to fish, talk, and dream. I thought Mom would want to keep it too. Instead, she wanted to sell it immediately and split the money. I refused. That's how I ended up sitting in court, watching my mother's lawyer argue that I was unfit to manage property or finances. And then, to make matters worse, she took the stand herself. I'll never forget the words she spoke that day. "My daughter can barely hold a job," she said coldly. "She jumps from one thing to another. She's irresponsible, unstable, and emotionally volatile. That cottage will just fall apart in her hands." Every sentence felt like a knife. I'd expected distance, not destruction. I wanted to scream that I was working, that I was building a career, that I wasn't the lazy, broken woman she made me sound like. But my lawyer told me to stay calm. "Let her dig her own hole," he whispered. Then came my turn to speak. My voice trembled at first, but I held my ground. "I don't have flashy jobs," I said. "But I've worked hard. I've taken care of others when no one cared for me. I don't need to prove that to anyone." The courtroom was quiet except for the scratching of pens. I noticed a few heads turning in the audience. One man in particular, older, dignified, and sitting in the back row, was watching intently. The judge adjourned for a short recess before final statements. As I stepped out, my lawyer leaned in. "Do you know who that man is?" I shook my head. "That's Chief Justice Harrison Wells," he said quietly. "One of the highest judicial figures in the state. No idea why he's here." I frowned. "I don't either." But then it hit me. Harrison Wells. The name rang a bell. 3 years earlier, I'd worked as a part-time administrative assistant for a private foundation that helped manage judicial scholarships. My boss was an older gentleman who insisted everyone call him Mr. H. He was kind, humble, and always respectful. I never saw him as anyone special, just a decent man who appreciated hard work. When court resumed, my mother's lawyer gave his closing argument. Long, rehearsed, and full of smug confidence. He painted me as an emotional drifter with no direction in life. My mother sat there, chin high, convinced she'd already won. Then, just as the judge was about to conclude, a voice rose from the back of the courtroom. "Your Honor," said the man I'd noticed earlier, standing slowly. "May I speak?" The room went silent. The judge blinked. "Chief Justice Wells." A collective murmur rippled through the room. Even my mother's lawyer looked startled. Wells stepped forward, his presence commanding yet calm. "Forgive the interruption, but I can't sit quietly while a good person's reputation is being shredded unfairly." He turned toward me. "Ms. Isabel, would you please stand?" My heart pounded as I rose. "This young woman," he continued, "worked for me directly for over a year. Not only did she manage our scholarship office, but she also reorganized our entire record system. She was punctual, dedicated, and honest, even when others around her weren't. I still have her recommendation letter framed in my office." The courtroom went completely still. He glanced toward my mother. "So when I hear someone call her irresponsible, I have to wonder what definition of responsibility we're using." My mother's face drained of color. Chief Justice Wells turned back to the judge. "If character is in question, let the record show that this woman has mine in full." He sat back down. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Even the opposing lawyer lowered his notes. The judge cleared his throat. "I think we've heard enough." Within minutes, the decision was made. The property would remain under joint ownership, but I would retain full management rights. My mother's request to sell it without my consent was denied. As people began to leave, I caught Wells's eye. He gave me a small nod, the kind that said, "I didn't do this for attention. I did it because it was right." Outside the courthouse, my mother tried to speak to me. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, voice shaking. "I just thought selling would be easier." "No, Mom," I said softly. "You thought it would be easier for you." She looked away, guilt flickering across her face. For the first time, I realized she wasn't just cruel. She was afraid. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of being left behind. But her fear had cost her something she might never get back. My trust. Later that evening, I got an email from Chief Justice Wells's assistant. It simply said, "You earned that respect. Never let anyone take your truth away again." I printed it and tucked it into the drawer of my father's old desk at the lake house. A reminder that sometimes, justice doesn't come from anger or revenge. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, in the form of someone who believes in you when the people who should have don't. And on that day, the woman everyone said could barely hold a job stood taller than she ever had. Not because she'd won a court case, but because she'd finally proven that character speaks louder than blood.